Hello and welcome to my first ever podcast episode. My name's Ryan Condon and I've decided to start a new podcast. I'm going to get into some detail shortly, but the main crux of why I've decided to start a new podcast series is there's a few reasons. The first main reason is I spend quite a lot of my time off screen writing scripts for my videos, the videos I upload to my YouTube channel. Now, I write these scripts for my videos because I know that without them, I'm going to ramble on and waffle on about stuff that's not relevant for the benefit of the video. And also, I'm going to just, lose the audience. So I write these scripts to keep me on track. However, there is one downside to writing these scripts, and that's that there's a lot of information that doesn't make it into the finished article. So I've decided to start a podcast to talk about some of my exploits, some of my adventures, some of the challenges I take on, my day-to-day training, so my Zwifting, my running, and also I wanted to use this podcast to talk about some big challenges I've got coming up in the next few months. So this podcast series is going to be me talking about some of the things I get up to in my day-to-day life, but also a review of some big challenges I've got over the next few months. So if that's something you think will interest you, then I hope you will take the time to listen to this podcast. Another reason I've decided to start this podcast is I get quite a few comments on my videos saying that people enjoy watching my videos when they're Zwifting, when they're doing stuff around the house. They have it on in the background and they watch it. Now, obviously, I make my videos for people to watch as they see fit, to consume it in any way they want to. However, I actually thought that a podcast might work out quite well for that audience of individuals. So you guys listening to this now in the car, when you're on Zwift, when you're on the treadmill, when you're going to the gym, when you're out for a run, on your headphones, however you see fit. So I'm hoping there will be an audience for this. I've committed to creating 8 episodes for season 1. This is episode number 1. I already have all 8 episode ideas lined up, and I'm going to spend the next couple of weeks recording them, and then I'm going to upload them weekly to my Patreon and Join channels. The title of this podcast, I've decided I'm going to call it SitRep, the SitRep podcast. SitRep is something you might have heard me mention and say in some of my videos. It stands for It stands for situational report. Situational report meaning how you feeling. I think it's a military term. I'm learning as I go in. I don't want perfect to be the enemy of good. So I've decided, this has been something I've been thinking about for a while, I've decided to jump in feet first and start recording. Once I've completed season 1 and I start uploading season 2, if I get to season 2, hopefully there will be an appetite for these podcast series episodes. As soon as I start making season 2, I'll then make it public on my YouTube channel for people to then listen and download and listen to my podcast there as well. So at the moment, my intention is for this to be an exclusive access only, Patreon access only, joiners access only podcast benefit. So it's going to be a perk. It's going to be a small treat for people that pay to support me, which I really appreciate. And that's probably going to come up in future episodes. So I'm not going to go on about that now. So that's kind of context for why I have decided to start this podcast. Also, I very much enjoy editing and making YouTube videos. That's not going to stop anytime soon. I can see myself making YouTube videos for a long time to come, as long as I've got stuff that's interesting. And even if it's not, I've got to be honest, when I started my YouTube channel, the stuff that I was recording and making, looking back on it now, some of them are quite cringy, especially some of my first early videos. If you go back on my channel and have a look at them, then you'll see that they weren't that interesting, and that didn't bother me either. So that's not even a prerequisite for me to continue making YouTube videos. So yeah, this is why I have a script, guys, because I'm starting to go off on a tangent about making YouTube videos that I made 5 years ago. Anyway, getting back on track. Today's subject is weight loss. So very recently, I passed the 4,000 subscriber mark on my YouTube channel, for which I am eternally grateful for every single viewer of mine on my channel. Every one of those 4,000 subscribers, I very much appreciate, because they're individuals who have decided that what I make is interesting enough for them to consider coming back to watch again. And that means a lot. So when I first uploaded my first ever fitness video, let me bring it up now actually while I'm on the podcast. So the first video is titled Dad Getting Ready for Race to the Stones, Only 57 Days to Go. That was my first ever YouTube video. And yeah, I've already said it was, I watched it back for the first time not long ago and I found it really cringy. However, when I first started on this journey, I wanted to document and journal my fitness, my fat to fit journey. So getting back to my point, today's video is about weight loss, and I started on that journey 5 years ago, and I started recording it for YouTube. And a big part of that journey was me documenting it, putting it out there, and holding myself to account. That's how my my fitness YouTube channel kind of started. So I wanted to talk a little bit today on this episode about that journey, what made me suddenly go from a 190 kg or 30 stone for anyone in the UK bloke to, the sub 95 kg man I am now. So I wanted to talk a little bit today on this episode about that weight loss journey. I wanted to take some time to talk through why I woke up one day at the end of 2018 going into 2019 and decided that enough was enough. I didn't want to weigh 30 stone or 190 kg. I lost 95, well, I have lost as of today, just over 95 kg, which spurred me on to make a video for my YouTube channel about my weight loss journey, which ultimately then led to me wanting to make a podcast episode. So this is my first ever episode, and it's about the journey that I've been on. It kind of makes sense. That's where I start at the beginning, because that tends to be how stories start, and I'm hoping there'll be a story throughout this podcast series that you guys can enjoy. So that's the intro to my first episode. Please let me know if this is something which interests you, and as we go through these episodes, which I really hope you stick with and listen to, and hopefully I get better at podcasting as I did with YouTube, because again, watching some of my early videos, I have definitely got better. Even though I'm not the finished article, I am 100% better than I used to be. So I'm hoping that same journey will happen on this podcast, just hopefully a lot quicker than 5 years. Recently, I asked for questions in a community post on my channel. I put the question out on my community post. I also put it out on my Patreon, and I asked for people to come back to me with things that they would like to ask me to celebrate my 4,000 subscriber benchmark. Now, in 2018 and 2019, coming to the end of my 30s, about to turn 40, I know I don't look it, I weighed approximately 190 kgs or about 30 stone. I mentioned that already. Let me just check because I know I have quite a large American audience. Let me just quickly look. So 190 kgs in pounds is 419 pounds for our American friends listening to this podcast. 419 pounds. That's a lot. I weighed a lot, put it that way. So for anyone, including me sometimes, that can't picture just how big this is, I Googled the average man in his 40s, in the UK this is, weighs 13 stone. I was 17 stone heavier than average Joe that you may pass on the high street, just to put that into context. According to Google, the average man in the UK weighs 13 stone, and I was 17 stone heavier than that. That's how heavy I was. So I wasn't just above average, I was double average and then some. So obviously the implications that this had on my health, both physical and mental, was huge. As I got older, those implications started to feel worse every day. There was one tipping point, not the main one, when I realised that I'd allowed things to go too far. It was that most traditional bathroom scales, so the scales that most people have in their houses, didn't, and probably still don't, I haven't checked recently, go past 160 kg or 25 stone. I was too heavy to be able to weigh myself on the scales that my missus used in the bathroom. Forget being able to buy clothes off the peg, which was something else that I couldn't do in normal high street shops, that is. That privilege I'd given up on years ago. But I was past the point that even bathroom scale manufacturers didn't bother with. I was too heavy to weigh myself. I had to go to my doctor to get weighed. I mean, if this wasn't Channel 5 documentary fact, then I don't know what is. And again, for any Americans or anyone that doesn't probably live in the UK, Channel 5 is a channel we have in the UK that is has some quite extreme documentaries. But the problem was going to the GP just to get weighed wasn't a great or efficient way of doing things. I mean, anyone living in the UK knows how hard it is to get a doctor's appointment. Thank you, the Tory party. So I then discovered and used the scales in my local pharmacy. I found them to be very accurate because they were. They not only measured my weight, but also other stats such as my body fat and my BMI. It was useful information, which at the time I didn't know what to do with. But looking back on it, it had a huge impact on my on being able to context my weight loss. So when I had weeks where I wasn't losing anything, which obviously you will have when you start on this journey. Initially, the weight fell off me, but you will have weeks where it just doesn't go to plan, or you've fallen off the wagon, or you just plateaued for whatever reason. And on those weeks, it was very good to be able to see that it wasn't just actual fat loss or weight, the actual physical amount that I weighed was changing, but also my body mass, my fat percentage. So, you know, my muscle I was getting strong. As I was exercising, I was gaining muscle strength, and that was all being measured and weighed through this machine as well. So now in 2024, 5 years on, I now weigh just under 95 kgs, 94.6 to be exact. I had a weigh-in 2 weeks ago. I haven't had a weigh-in since, so I could be slightly under that now. And but I now weigh just under 95 kgs. That's a 95 kg or 15 stone weight loss. I've lost 2 stone more than a whole average adult male from the UK. I've lost a whole person. It sounds strange when I describe it this way, but that's how I see it. I've lost a whole human adult male. 15 stone I've lost. For my American friends that I know enjoy my channel, because thank you YouTube Analytics, that's a 210 pound weight loss transformation I've gone through. And this also feels like a good time as any to make this podcast about my weight loss journey, as I've now lost almost exactly half of my body weight. I am literally half the man I used to be. That's a good soundbite if ever I've heard one. I might play that at the beginning of this podcast. The thing that really blows my mind is how I moved around carrying all that weight. I look back, or I think back to the time where I weighed that, and I just don't recall feeling that heavy. I mean, I wasn't running any marathons. I mean, I wasn't even walking any further than from my house to the car. And I was very much on a journey that even walking from my house to the car probably would have been on a finite timescale. I recently route marched the Yorkshire Three Peaks carrying 45 pounds or a 20 kg backpack. And it was really, really bloody heavy. I used to live and operated carrying 5 times that amount on my back, legs, arms, and stomach. I couldn't imagine carrying a backpack that weighed what I used to weigh. I'd have to get a backpack and stuff it with 15 stone worth of bricks and dead weight to be able to even come close to replicating what I weighed, and I don't think that would be physically possible. And back in 2018 and 2019, when I started on this journey, there were next to no fitness YouTubers that I used to watch that talked about running, cycling, or even weight training for bigger men like me. Of course, there were podcasts and YouTubers that made content about weight loss. I mean, the industry and the market is absolutely saturated with fitness influencers. But probably for obvious reasons, you don't get to be as big as me by having an interest in running, cycling, or weight training. So I suppose the logic would be, why would they offer and make videos for a non-existent audience? But there just wasn't anyone talking to people like me who physically couldn't do the things they were describing. I mean, I remember watching one YouTube channel and they were talking about doing couch to 5K. So getting up and going and following this podcast, which is provided by the NHS. And by the way, I'm not poo-pooing this as an idea. I think that the couch to 5K process is phenomenal. I actually made a couple of videos on the couch to 5K process, and it's really, really good. But I couldn't even complete the first step of the couch to 5K. And for anyone that doesn't know what couch to 5K is, it's basically a NHS recommended fitness program that you can sign up to. It doesn't cost anything. You can just download the podcast and the instructions from the NHS website. And then what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to get you from the couch, which the assumption is the couch, you're unfit if you're sitting on the couch, to being able to run a 5k distance and then possibly even achieving a certain time that you're aiming for. That was the point of this over a long period. I think it's over 20 weeks, is it? I can't remember off the top of my head. I did it a long time ago. I have made a video about my process of following it. With the exception of maybe Couch to 5k, there just wasn't anything out there for bigger men like me to be able to get motivated by, inspired by. And it just seems obvious, being that people don't get to be 190 kg with having aspirations to be able to run, cycle, or even go to the gym. So why would they make content for me? But having gone through that transformation, having lived that journey and still somewhat being on it, I'm very much on it now. I know that there is an audience for this sort of thing. Men and women wanting to make a change like I did. Now, all the videos I did watch talked about how to run or cycle further using this tactic or try this training plan to get faster, but there was always a basic assumption by the video creator that as a viewer, I had a basic level of fitness, and that assumption was just very much wrong for me. I had zero levels of fitness, knowledge of fitness. Again, going back to what I originally said, I struggled to walk from the house to the car without having to have a sit down. There were exceptions to this in the form of the Couch to 5k videos, for example, but I couldn't run. So even these were a stretch too far for me. I always remember thinking about watching some of these fitness influencers, some of these individuals that were on YouTube that made content for people to lose weight and get fit. I remember thinking, put on a 100 kg weighted backpack, so double your weight. You know, they probably weighed less than 100 kg, but you know, let's not go crazy. Put a 100 kg weighted backpack on and then attempt to follow your own instructions to run faster or further. I bet they couldn't. And I couldn't. I certainly couldn't. I don't recommend putting on a 100 kg backpack, by the way. It's really heavy. You might injure yourself. Also, I will say really quickly, based on my recent experience with buying a really decent backpack for my fan dance challenge I've got coming up in July, good luck trying to find one strong enough to carry a 100 kg load. For anyone that wants to know more about the fan dance, I have got videos on my YouTube channel talking about the fan dance. I've got a series playlist you can watch as well. It's a really good challenge I've got coming up. Again, that will be a future episode on this podcast. Now, for anyone listening to this, I should point out that I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a dietitian, I'm certainly not a fitness expert. I always tell anyone interested in what I do not copy me. I'm not a fitness YouTuber, but I do make YouTube videos about fitness. I did what I did and I do what I do as it works for me. I wouldn't assume to tell anyone else what to do or to copy me, but I do hope to inspire as I once wanted to be inspired. That's my aim. That's why I do what I'm doing. That's why I make videos. That's why I'm making this podcast. The best piece of advice I can give to anyone wanting to make a change, lose weight, or get fit: do what you know will work for you. Don't copy or emulate anyone, especially YouTubers or influencers who have a vested interest in clicks and making money ultimately. Muscles don't necessarily mean fit, and bright, sparkly gym clothes don't necessarily mean capable or knowledgeable. Results and change always comes from two things: willpower and belief. As long as you've got willpower and you believe in yourself, you will succeed, regardless of what else happens. I make videos on my YouTube channel to document my fitness journey. I started making videos about some of my first walks and challenges 5 years ago now, as a way of keeping myself focused on the challenge, and I hoped to be able to look back at some of these videos happy with my progress. I am not happy with the quality of the video or the way in which I talk to it awkwardly, talk to camera that is, but I very much enjoy looking back on them and seeing how far I've come. I also had zero cardio ability. I couldn't physically move fast enough to call anything I did a run. At best it was a shuffle, but I've got to be honest, 99.9% of the time it was a slow walk. So I walked everywhere first and pretty much didn't stop. I would first walk to the end of my road, then the end of the next road, then to the park, and then around the park, and eventually I could walk further for longer, taking advantage of local footpaths and trails, and I eventually fell in love with the local area, and I still miss that local area because we moved away about 18 months ago. We live in a completely different part of the county. I walked every day for a year. I'm not exaggerating, every single day. my targets and ambitions are now more fitness related because they can be. I've moved away from being 100% focused on my weight loss, and I still have a long way to go to being the person I imagine I can be. My aspirations, my vision of what I want to be has significantly changed. When I started out on this 5 years ago, if you'd have told me this is what I would be in 2024, I would have ripped your arm off. I would have took that 100% and run for the hills. However, now I've reached that point, of course, like any greedy person would do when they've achieved it, I want more. It's become intoxicating, and I want to keep pushing myself to see what I can achieve. 5 years ago, I couldn't set fitness ambitions as I physically couldn't achieve them. It was pointless, and I knew it would end in disappointment. There was no point for me turning up at a park run hoping to run a sub 30-minute park run, as I couldn't run to the end of my road. I think I've made the point about not being able to run. I've said that quite a few times. I had to focus on the only real barrier that I had, and that was my weight, my really heavy frame. Anything else was just white noise. This is why I made the point about the sub 30-minute park run. There's no point setting targets like that because they're just unrealistic. And if you lose weight, those things become so much more achievable. There's no point me setting myself a target to run a sub 4-hour marathon, which is my new 2024-2025 target. There's no point me setting a target to run under 25 minutes on a park run. Again, another one of my new aspirations. There's no point me wanting to win a Cat C Zwift race. Again, another one of my aspirations. There's no point doing any of that if I weigh too much, and it just makes everything I do so much more harder. It's kind of like going into a boxing fight with both arms tied behind your back. You can go into the ring, you can take the punches, you're going to get knocked out. You know, you could dance around, you can bob and weave, you can say all the right things in a press conference beforehand, but at the end of the day, both your hands are tied behind your back. You are not going to win. And that's how I saw my weight loss. I completely removed everything else. When I watched videos where people were talking about going faster or further, when I listened to other runners giving me advice, and oh boy, did I have people give me advice. I still get it now. People, human beings, love to give advice. And I just drowned it all out and focused on the only thing I knew would make everything physically easier, faster, better, was reducing my weight. So individual cardio, personal fitness, being strong, leg strength, arm strength is of course part of that. But I knew that if I focus on losing weight through fitness and healthy, clean eating, and if I'm honest, walking, then the rest would take care of itself. And when I eventually lost enough weight, I could then become a little bit more strategic, choosing to try running, strength training, cycling. It allowed me to unlock the next level if it was a computer game. A good question I got in response to a YouTube community post, which was part of the reason I wanted to make this video. I wanted to get questions from individuals that watch my videos about my weight loss journey, which I talk quite a lot about in my videos. One of those questions I got was, did you have a defining wake-up moment that led to you one day to recognise that you were morbidly obese and needed to do something about it? What was the motivation behind it all? So first off, thank you to the individual that asked this question. Thank you for using the term morbidly obese. I really appreciate that. I will attempt to answer this throughout the rest of this podcast episode. It's really not an easy one to nail down, but it is a really good question. I did mention that the scales being an embarrassing wake-up moment for me, but this is such a superficial issue that doesn't warrant being part of this answer. And then the same person asked, as part of the same question, you have what I'd consider to be an extreme mindset on exercise now. But that obviously wasn't always there. So I just find it fascinating as to how that developed seemingly overnight. Now, this individual isn't wrong here. My new mindset, or newish mindset, I've been like it now for the last 5 years, extreme or not, obviously wasn't there before I woke up and decided to make change. Otherwise, I wouldn't have allowed myself to get to 190 kg by the age of 39. That's how old I was when I decided to make this change. Being that heavy wasn't an accident, and it certainly didn't happen overnight. It was a lifetime of really, really poor choices. There is a David Goggins. I always get nervous about mentioning David Goggins because he's a very extreme character, and he can be one of those Marmite characters that people love or hate because he is very in your face, punch you in the face and then run off sort of character. There was a David Goggins short that I watched that resonated with me. I think it was titled Unbalanced, where he basically is on stage and he's doing a public speech, a public talk, and he talks about mindset where society is broken down into individuals that believe that it's okay not to be okay, and which of course it is, and we need to think about ourselves and be kind to ourselves, etc., etc., etc. But when you want to make this level of change, and it felt like he was kind of talking about the scenario I was in, where my situation was quite extreme. 190 kg is very, very heavy. I was very, very big, and that's quite an extreme situation. So I suppose extreme solutions or extreme problems require extreme measures to fix it, and I became quite unbalanced. Everything I did with a all or nothing approach to it. So I'm not doing a very good job of explaining the David Goggins short that I watched, but yeah, it kind of resonated with me because it made me feel that what I had done was right for me at the time, and I knew it was unbalanced because everyone around me, with the exception of my partner Tracy and my 2 children, everyone around me, my friends and extended family, called me out on it, and they said that what you're doing isn't realistic. You literally can't do all the things you're saying you're going to do. It's just not going to work. And when I tried it, some people, it annoyed. It made them question their own personal circumstances about why they're not maybe doing so many things. So I think they saw it as being unbalanced as well. Now, this David Goggins short or video hit a nerve with me, as this was 100% my mindset and I didn't even realize it. I was 100% unbalanced. I probably still am. I only really realized it when I speak to other people in my life who have no interest in their own health or fitness. Now, if I said this to them directly, they would get offended, and I just would never do that because it's just not my style. But they have their own rationales and barriers that they think means they can't change, and they justify it, they rationale it. For the record, I'm not referring to serious health implications that affect anyone's ability to exercise. I'm talking about our mindset now as a society. We've normalised a fast lifestyle, and anyone breaking from that norm is considered unbalanced in their own mindset. When you walk down any high street in the UK and probably in the rest of the world, you will see that the majority of people you pass have zero interest in their own fitness levels or what they eat. They have no thought to the consequence that their diet will have on their physical and mental well-being. I know this is a triggering statement to some, and as I say it, I know that there'll be individuals that will switch off to this. But I say it with confidence because this used to be me. I was 100% the person I'm talking about. And I still enjoy the occasional treat, don't get me wrong. My biggest vice now is a tub of Ben & Jerry's cookies and cream vegan ice cream. I'm a sucker for the ice cream aisle in Tesco's. However, I only eat this after a big event as a treat, and it is a treat. It is not something I eat weekly, daily, monthly, however other people consume it. I do it in moderation. Even from my early teens, I had a really, really unhealthy relationship with exercise, food. I overate. And when I discovered beer, oh my God, earlier in my teens than I would care to admit on a public podcast, then that was game over for me. And it was game over for any accidental fitness possibilities that I might have stumbled across in my early 20s. Throughout my teens and all of my 20s and 30s, I was the opposite of fit. I saw fitness, healthy eating, even mental well-being on the back of it as mumbo jumbo. Anyone that talked about mental health, I was born in the 80s, so mental health just wasn't a thing. But I saw this healthy lifestyle, in inverting commas, because I can't think of a better way of describing it, as an area full of fake influencers and snake oil salesmen. Sport was for watching at the weekend with a beer and a burger. At the age of 18, I started at the bottom of the corporate ladder, working my way up through the ranks and salary bandings, eventually peaking in a fairly well-paid position. So I wasn't only ignorant to the possibilities and benefits that physical exercise could afford me, but I was now completely time poor as well. So even if I did stumble across something, I wouldn't have had the time to do it anyway. Any spare time I might have had was spent decompressing. Now I'm doing the inverted commas symbols with my hands, decompressing. Anyone that's in or had a stressful job will know exactly what I mean by decompressing. Another word for drinking to switch off from the stresses of the day. Decompressing. The only reason I mention my career is that it had an enabling effect on my very poor life choices, and it's the best way I can answer the commentators' first question about having a defining wake-up moment that led to me doing something about it. A big part of my job involved a lot of social events, eating, and a lot of drinking. Networking was a big part of my role, and there was a huge drinking culture. As I moved up through the career ladder, the financial benefits were great, but the lines between my job and my home life became more and more blurred. Now, this is probably quite a good segue into another question that I was asked on the back of one of my community posts. Do the wife and kids see you at half your weight and now think you'll stop this journey and they'll get time back with you? It must take a lot of time and effort to do what you do. Do you ever see yourself reaching a point of contentment? Now, this was a really, really good question and one I wasn't expecting, but it is one that I do get asked, having now thought about it, in various different ways from extended friends and family. I will say that in 2024, my friends and family are just completely oblivious to all the crazy shenanigans I get up to, all the big challenges I do. They've stopped now asking those questions. They've realised that what I'm doing isn't going to change. But when they saw what I was doing was working, they even started to copy me. They started to copy some of my tactics, especially with food. And I did see a few of my friends doing occasional exercises, and a few of them signed up to marathons, having never done them before. So I know that what I was doing was influencing them indirectly because they saw the results I was getting and they knew that what I was doing was working. Now, there is an assumption that it's possibly selfish to spend my spare time walking, running and cycling, and then making videos about walking, running and cycling. Obviously, those videos take as much time, sometimes more, than the actual running and the cycling does. It probably is selfish, but I always make a point of trying to involve them in my adventures. Recently, I took my youngest on one of my adventures over the Yorkshire Three Peaks. Both of my children have been involved in my fitness journey from the very beginning, and all three of them have been a huge part of the stories within my videos. If it wasn't for them, I couldn't do what I do, and I tell them that all the time. One of the future episodes of this podcast will be me sat down with Scarlett talking about our journey over the Yorkshire Three Peaks, and you get to have a candid view of it from a teenager's perspective. There's no way I could do what I do if it wasn't for the constant support of the most important three people in my life. Now, I will say, because I know she probably won't listen to this because she lives with me, but Tracy is probably my biggest supporter. Every time I go to her with my latest challenge, she of course rolls her eyes, but always offers her support in the form of ideas and solutions to barriers I might face. When I started on this journey, I did so expecting it to end when I lost some weight. I didn't expect this journey to start to define who I am and have such a huge effect on my mindset. I mentioned before a tip for anyone wanting to lose weight and or get fit. Here's another one. And it's a really, really good tip. And it's to include those closest to you. Explain why you're trying to do what you're doing to the ones that you love the most. Gain their buy-in, as I promise you that if they love you as much as you love them, then your early starts in the morning, your wake up, your alarm calls, your long journeys to start lines or requests for pickups will require their buy-in. It will require their patience and understanding. Having them invested in your personal journey will be the difference to success and failures. And I can't emphasize this enough, lots and lots of presents, treats and impromptu lunches for them at their favorite restaurants, just to doubly ensure their support is appreciated. Never underestimate the power of a supportive and motivational partner, wife, husband, or even friend. Just someone, it doesn't matter who they are, just someone that you can bounce off and someone who understands what it is you're trying to achieve. Because I'm telling you now, you might have one person supporting you, but you're going to have many, many naysayers telling you that what you're doing is unbalanced, is extreme, is unnecessary, is wrong. And it isn't. If you're doing something, it's better than doing nothing. I'm just going to really, really quickly just go back to my corporate career, my really demanding, extremely demanding job. My alcohol consumption, because of that role, significantly increased from being social to being used daily. Social being that I don't drink at home, only at social events, parties, networking events, gatherings, etc., to now drinking at home on a daily basis as a way to switch off from the stresses of a demanding job, a way to decompress. I mentioned that earlier. The weekend only started when I had a beer or glass of wine in my hand. And it wasn't just the weekend. Sometimes the evening only started. I was stopped work when I was drinking a glass of wine. Then the weekend started to start on Thursday nights. That's when I would ramp up my drinking, and it lasted all the way through to Monday nights. And let's face it, Mondays are very stressful. I don't mean I'm drinking all the way through. I just mean when I get home from work, the weekend started on a Thursday night instead of a Friday night, and it carried on through till Monday night after work. I will say, in full transparency, I'm massively playing this darker aspect of my life down to keep this podcast light. I want you to enjoy this podcast. I don't want to have you listen to someone talk about their deepest, darkest concerns. No one wants me going into detail here. Suffice to say, these were dark days though. And if you are struggling with this, then of course, the biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone listening to this podcast, I'm not an expert, but the biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone suffering with this is reach out and ask for help. Because there's a lot of resources out there that can help. And then, of course, this aspect of my life had a knock-on effect on my family. I wasn't present when I was at home, as I was always on my phone working. And then when I wasn't working, because I had switched off and decompressed, in inverted commas, to forget about work, I had zombied out in front of the telly. These are the regrets I have. I don't regret changing, exercising, running, Zwifting, doing the big events that I've done over the last 5 years. I don't regret any of them. I'll never regret the newfound freedom I now have thanks to the changes I have now made. Now, this is the really, really important bit that answers that question directly. When I am with my family, when we are doing family time, weekends, evenings, when we're on holiday, when we're doing events that I am signed up to and they're coming with me, I am present and I'm engaged with what they're doing. Which is what I wasn't before. The lights were on, but no one was home, as Tracy would say. So the way in which I solved this, which is probably what you're all hoping I will say, the way in which I solved this as a problem was I just went fully teetotal. I gave up the booze. I quit. And I know that sounds easier said than done. And trust me when I say, this comes back to the bit where I said about, I'm not going to go into graphic detail. Trust me when I say giving up the booze and going fully teetotal is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Running 100k, having a race in Zwift, climbing a mountain with a 45-pound Bergen doesn't come even close to how hard it was to give up alcohol completely. But I knew this was the only way to solve it. I knew that with my obsessive personality, there was nothing I could do. I couldn't just dip my toe in the water. I couldn't just have a social drink. I couldn't just have one glass and leave it at that, which is what most people can do, apparently. It's what I'm being told. I just couldn't do that. So I knew I had to step away from it, and I did. And I haven't had a drink for 5 years now. It was one of the biggest changes I made, and one of the best things I ever did. I mean, literally, the weight fell off me. Yeah, so completely teetotal now. One of the best things I ever did. Wouldn't go back to it. Interestingly, it was also one of the things that my friends and family had the biggest problem with. I stopped being invited to parties because they thought I had a problem with booze and I couldn't be around it, so made that decision for me instead of asking me and letting me decide. I would have gone. I was happy to be at parties because I wanted to see my friends and family. I didn't need alcohol to enjoy myself. When you are at these events and people don't see you drinking and you're standing there with a glass of Coke or a cup of coffee and they're, free sheets to the wind, that's where the onslaught starts. That's where their opinions, advice, all comes out the woodwork because of their lack of inhibition. It all just floods. So anyway, that was an interesting byproduct to going teetotal in a working class family from the UK, which I've said this in a video before. Drinking is a hobby. It's not even a hobby, it's a professional sport in this country. Now, I also fund my new lifestyle 0.001% from my YouTube videos, as each video makes me about £1.50, and 99.9% from our family-run small business. Running our own business not only means we spend almost every waking moment together, but it allows me to plan my time effectively between my fitness YouTube channel and what pays the bills. This point then leads me quite nicely to another question I was asked. Calorie restriction versus exercise for long-term weight loss, and what's next? The what's next part I'll answer shortly. In regards to calories versus exercise, I'm going to assume they're asking me what I think is best, a calorie deficit diet or exercise for weight loss. In short, the answer is both and neither at the same time. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger. I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It's basically like his cat, where the answer is both. They're alive and dead because they're inside the box. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Schrodinger's cat. But yeah, it's the same. So the same rule applies. Calorie deficit diet and exercise for weight loss both works and doesn't work in equal measure. Now, what I mean by this is calorie deficit can work short term, but it really isn't a good long-term strategy, as it ignores important things like nutritional value. I could eat 2,500 calories of Haribo sweets or 2,500 calories of broccoli. I mean, it'd have to be a lot of broccoli to reach 2,500 calories, because I think there's like mostly water, isn't it, broccoli? But I could eat that in a day, and I'd be having the NHS recommended calorie intake for a man of my size. But both would be as bad as each other, as neither of them would be offering me the nutritional value I'd need to live, let alone run, cycle, or probably even stay off the toilet. I also think that fad diets can work short term, but they also ignore the most important aspect of a successful diet, and that's real behavioural change. That's mental, psychological, behavioural change. You see, I needed to change the root cause of my diet because my diet wasn't right in the first place. There's no point me going out and exercising if when I get home, I'm eating crap. Exercise alone isn't always good enough to get the weight off and keep it off. I always remember a story an old colleague of mine shared with me years ago now. He told me that both him and his wife, this is a true story by the way, that both him and his wife had joined a local gym to lose weight. They had signed up to a special couples weight loss program. I don't really understand the details. I've never done one. It's probably one of these things that you see billboards and adverts for as you walk down the high street. He was keen to tell me that he had lost 2 pounds and his wife had lost 1 pound by doing this program in a week. And to celebrate, they treated themselves to a Chinese takeaway, which was apparently his favourite meal. He was very happy with his success. Now, the reason why I tell this story, you can probably guess, is I remember being bowled over by the lunacy of his statement that they had ruined all their hard work and money at the gym by eating more in calories to celebrate than they would have burned in exercise. They had been better off staying on the sofa, skipping the celebration takeaway, not going to the gym, and they probably wouldn't have put on as much weight as that takeaway would have done, and they would have been financially better off as well. I learned early on in my journey that food and exercise go hand in glove. You can't have success in one without the other. To put it bluntly, there is no point going for a 300 calorie burning run to then eat a 400 calorie energy bar. They're just sweets in sheep's clothing. You're always much better off just having a really nice, clean, home-cooked meal. Going back to my pre-2019 pressure cooker lifestyle, I used to eat to live, always on the go and always fast. Takeaways because I was home late, too late to cook, and I didn't want to cook because that got in the way of decompression time, and retail park meal deals and Whoppers for lunch as it was convenient and quick and didn't stop me working. Buying and eating clean was time consuming and I didn't have time for that nonsense. And that wasn't even really a good enough excuse because I know that Tracy would have done that for me if I'd have asked her to. This was my daily life and one that no one would willingly sign up to if they knew the consequences, which I did and chose to ignore. Now, I buried my head in the sand and I rationalised a lot of my behaviour and poor choices with stupid opinions like I'm naturally big or I've got a slow metabolism. Literally anything to justify and defend my poor decisions. So to answer that original question in a sentence, mindset, willpower, and a planned behavioural overhaul is far more important than calorific intake or exercise alone. My obese size was due to self-inflicted systematic abuse and an ingrained learnt belief that it wasn't my fault. And then one other problem: fear of change. My favourite saying: change only happens when the fear of staying the same outweighs the fear of change. Who said that? That was said, let me just quickly Google this. Change only happens when the fear of staying the same outweighs the fear of change. Now, I've actually changed the saying because I really like this saying. It's one of my favourite sayings. It's a quote I use quite a lot. I think he actually said change only happens when the risk of staying the same outweighs the risk of change. But I like it with the word fear in there, because for me, fear was the problem. That was the word that described why I spent so long not allowing the change to happen. This was actually said by someone called Tony Robbins, who is an American author and lifestyle coach. He's not really the type of character that I would normally listen to or watch. I haven't really watched any of his stuff, but I did see this quote. And I actually agree with this quote. I thought, even a broke clock is right twice a day. Originally, my whole psyche and daily habitual routine needed a complete overhaul, but counting calories for me worked at the time. I did count a lot of calories. My biggest problem wasn't only what I ate, but also my portion sizes. I could and would consume easily in excess of 5,000 calories in a day, and this would ramp up to 6,000 or 7,000 at the weekend. 5,000 to 7,000 calories sounds extreme. It is extreme. But if you actually measured and documented what you eat on a daily basis, then those calories really start to build up. And if they're not burnt off, then they have to go somewhere. Sense checking and significantly reducing my daily calories meant I could control my portion sizes, and this was one of the biggest successes I have had in my weight loss. At the start of 2019, I remember losing anything up to a stone a month. This was a crazy weight loss and a big boost to my motivation. It quickly slowed and eventually plateaued the more I lost, but these early wins made me realise that my goal to one day weigh a weight that would allow me to run was possible. And then I was asked another question on my Patreon, I think this was, how do you keep motivated and not regress? And then I got asked another one: how do you resist falling back into old habits? Do you have a routine that keeps you aiming in the right direction, like meditation or prayer? These two questions were quite similar. Now, I don't meditate and I don't pray, even though I find myself in meditative states whilst I'm out running and cycling. If I'm having a really bad day, if I've had a really bad week, if I'm dealing with something particularly stressful, I will go for a long run just for the sake of running. I won't take my camera with me. I probably won't even record it on my Garmin watch, because when I run, I do feel really, really good and I feel fantastic afterwards. It's also why I Zwift. On the back of my Zwift races, I get that exercise high that you get from a big high intensity workout. I'm lucky that I find what I do to be really enjoyable, and that plays a huge part. Don't get me wrong, there are days I don't want to run, I don't want to Zwift, I don't want to route march, I don't want to cycle, but on those days I have to force myself. But overall, I love the feeling of overcoming a really hard challenge, and I love training for them. If I am being particularly demotivated, if I am feeling lethargic and I can't be bothered to go out for that run, I know I've said that I force myself. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just let that day roll by and I go again tomorrow. I think, but the most important thing I can say, and this comes back to an earlier point I made, is relentless forward progress. Even if that progress is small, just keep moving forward. Don't regress, don't stand still, and don't stop. I also love making videos about my efforts and achievements, as this helps motivate me. I find it fun to talk to camera during my training events and on my big challenges. This is a really simple answer to what is probably quite a loaded question. Loaded in the sense that I'm sure they've asked that for a reason. Possibly they're feeling demotivated at the moment. They're struggling with their motivation. It's probably one of the biggest hurdles to overcome. But yeah, I've already said it. Just keep moving forward. As long as I'm moving forward, no matter how small, I can't be going backwards. And then I have weeks and months where I just ramp it up and I go for it. I'm very much not at my end goal. I am, again, not the finished article. I don't have a six-pack. I don't bench press 300 pounds. I haven't won any marathons, but even though I've lost 95 kgs, I'm now the fittest, strongest and fastest I've ever been in my life. And that includes my teenage years. Unlike other runners, Zwifters and cyclists I meet at events, I didn't have a peak in my 20s. I had no natural ability and I was beyond simply being unfit. To feel the way I feel now, I feel like I've won the lottery. I feel light, fast and strong, even when my marathon PR isn't the fastest or I'm still a Cat C wannabe Zwifter. I feel like I've achieved something. I won't mention being a cyclist, as that's one aspect of my fitness training that I still need stabilizers for. This probably isn't the answer these two commenters wanted when they asked the question. There isn't a secret to success that influencers or even weight loss companies would have you believe exist. My answer probably won't help you find your motivation unless you've been on the same journey I have. As the Lost Boys said to Robin Williams' Peter Pan in Hook, the film Hook, you need to find your happy place, otherwise you can't fly. You need to find your reason for why you're doing this. This is why copying or even emulating others on social media will never ever work long term, because they're not you. Having a target to lose weight or get fit isn't a target, it's a means to an end. It's the fitness equivalent of a car mechanic wanting to fix cars because he wants to use his new spanners. This might be great for the first, second or even third car, but eventually the novelty of the new spanners will wear off and they will just become regular old spanners, except you replace the spanners for running or cycling in this analogy, and the cars are your short-term weight loss and fitness goals. But what happens then? Once the novelty of running, going to the gym and or cycling wears off and you realise it's actually hard work and the results aren't huge, then what's your motivation? What's your happy place? Your motivation to lose weight can't be simply to lose weight. Your motivation to get fit can't be just to get fit. I'm telling you now that if it is, when the going gets tough and the pain and uncomfortable suffering kicks in, then your reason for why you're out suffering simply won't be enough. You have to have an emotional reaction to that pack of spanners. I've made that explanation far harder than it needed to be by adding in an analogy about spanners. You won't have enough of a motivator to override the urges, cravings, or negative feelings that inevitably will happen when you hit barriers involved with change. There will always be significant resistance and frictions involved with serious change. To overcome that, you need to have something slightly more motivating than losing a few pounds for your holiday, unless all you want to do is lose weight for your holiday. Then that's easy and you don't need to do any of this. Not everyone needs to run a marathon in under 4 hours or a park run in under 30 minutes. Sometimes exercise just for the sake of exercising to make you feel good. That sometimes can be enough. When you're hungry because you've attempted to reduce your calorie intake, when you're tired because you've run or cycled a long way and you think about why you're putting yourself through this and you remember it's to, in inverted commas, be fit or lose weight, then it simply won't be enough in that moment and you'll stop because you're tired and hungry. You'll pick up that donut or Big Mac and eat it because, let's face it, fuck it, at least you tried. That high street is full of triers. It's not my fault I'm not built for running. I'm a big bloke and 2,500 calories isn't enough for a hard-working 6'2" guy like me. I need more food. That's what I used to say to myself. Your happy place isn't worth shit and you fall from the sky like a lawyer with face paint on his belly. I need to watch Hook again. That's a great movie. Now this all sounds extreme, but I've been there. Trust me, you need real motivation, and that's 100% individual and specific to each and every one listening to this podcast. Find your happy place. Find your reason for why you're doing this. Another question I got asked, what's your secret to success when so many others have failed? I've said it before, there is no secret sauce, no magic spell or special pill. This is a question I've been asked before because people want to copy it thinking there's a shortcut. Most people I meet don't like change. I was no different, but suddenly at the end of 2018 into 2019, the scales moved and the fear of staying the same suddenly outweighed that innate fear of change. I did not want to stay the same, or at least the same as I was for the majority of my adult life. It's why organisations like Weight Watchers and Slim Fast and all the other diet companies you can imagine are so popular and make a fortune as a business. It's why we have Go Sober for October or Veganuary. Companies taking advantage of people's needs and wants to change, but offering a comfortable, controlled, dumbed down and sanitized version of that change. Just enough to dip your toe in and say you tried it, but not extreme enough to make you panic that your whole world will crumble around you. And then the next question, which was similar to the one that I just answered, how can others implement what you've learned and or accomplished? Believe you can do it. Know it will happen. Be kind to yourself, especially when the wheels fall off. And most importantly, keep moving forward, no matter how small those steps are. If things go wrong, which they will, and if they don't, then what you're doing isn't real change. If things go wrong, don't give up. Sleep on it and go again tomorrow. I woke up one day at the end of 2018 and decided enough was enough. Tracy told me relentlessly that I wasn't okay. She'd been telling me for a lot longer than the end of 2018. I quit alcohol. That had to be the first to go. I couldn't do anything until I fixed that problem. As long as I kept drinking, there would never be real change. I gave up all fried and processed food and obsessively counted my calories of everything I ate. I tried to eat as clean as possible. Of course, there were days where that didn't happen. Not because I wanted to eat low calories, but because I wanted to educate myself about what it was that I was eating. I saw fruit and vegetables as free calories, meaning that I didn't count these and I could eat as much fruit and veg as I wanted to. Doing this helped me with my biggest problem, which was portion control. I stopped all takeaways, fast food, fried food, sugar and sweets. I stopped snacking between meals. This was really hard, but that was wasted calories. I was constantly hungry, as I was now only eating 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day, pretty much half, at least half of what I was used to eating at the time. With the help of my partner Tracy, as I am unfortunately a terrible cook, and this had to be a family thing as I couldn't have separate meals for everyone else, I focused on healthy portion control meals 3 times a day. That's it. And then, not long after this change, I also turned fully vegan, partly due to my oldest daughter who wanted to stop eating animal products for animal welfare reasons, and I wanted to support her, but I was also interested to see if this fairly radical change would help me in my new weight loss and fitness ambitions. I'm going to talk about turning vegan and being vegan in a future podcast episode. For anyone that knew me, quitting alcohol and becoming vegan was a complete role reversal. It was like expecting water to stop being wet or asking a goldfish to climb a tree, completely against the grain. Interestingly, going from being a huge carnivorous meat eater to being a flapjack loving, long-haired, bearded, tree-hugging vegan was one of the best things I did from a weight loss and fitness perspective. Now, I will say really quickly that being a complete vegan novice meant I had to learn what was in my favourite food types, and this level of scrutiny educated me about what I was putting in my body. This was one of the biggest benefits of being vegan. The effects of what I was eating had on me and how best to fuel my ever-demanding fitness expectations I had on my body. Sometimes we just eat what we're told to by marketing firms and mega brands without actually knowing what's in the things that we're eating. In a nutshell, turning vegan made me an amateur entry-level nutritionist wannabe. Enough so that I knew what I was eating, but not so much of a know-it-all that I felt the need to film myself in an Asda reading the back of cereal packets and demanding people only eat red meat and broccoli. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean here. If you enjoy your Crunchy Nut cornflakes in the morning, then eat your Crunchy Nut cornflakes in the morning. Just maybe cut out the takeaways and McDonald's drive-through meals first. I took this obsessive approach to vegan food and applied it to my weight loss and fitness as well. I knew nothing about losing weight other than I needed to stop eating crap and eat less of what I did eat, and I knew even less about getting fit other than join a gym and avoid spinning classes at all costs. Have you seen a spinning class? They're mental. So I did what any normal, hugely obese bloke in his late 30s, early 40s would do. I signed up for a 100k ultramarathon event knowing full well that I couldn't and probably wouldn't finish it. That's the end of this episode. My next episode is going to be me answering more questions I had that didn't make it into this episode on the back of the community post where I requested questions. I got some really good questions, and I want to answer them ad hoc as I read them off the screen. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go through some of those comments and questions and just talk through them in the next episode. So hopefully you can join me. Then the episode after that is going to be me talking through my 100k ultra marathon that I completed in 2019 called Race to the Stones. Interestingly, I re-signed up to Race to the Stones this year. I'm going to have a return to 2024 Race to the Stones 5 years after I completed it the first time. It's going to be a really, really good event. And I'm going to talk through that in my 3rd episode in this series. So thank you for listening to this podcast. I really, really hope my first attempt at a podcast episode has gone down well. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I've got my volume levels correct. I hope my structure to this episode was worth listening to. I hope there weren't too many triggering aspects that I talked about. I just wanted to talk through kind of where my mindset was and answer the questions that I'd been asked about it. This is my honest opinion. Of course, everyone's going to be different. If I leave you with one thing, again, I've said this, I think 3 times throughout this episode. Don't copy anyone you see online. Take inspiration from it, find your happy place, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for listening.